So agency versus in-house, right? That's kind of the question. That's the clickbait, if you will, that everybody kind of wants to know. So I just want to, really what I want to talk about today is I kind of want to divide it into two sections. First is, again, exploring agency versus in-house, those two options and how that kind of delineates, and then kind of dive in more specifically, if and when you do work with an agency, what is the best, how can you get the most out of that relationship? How can you make sure that's a healthy relationship and you get the most for your money? So that's really what I want to dig into. So yes. So essentially, if you're running a business, I'm going to try to keep it as general as possible, actually, because I think it applies evenly almost across the board. So there are companies, there are product or service companies, and then you have different divisions of work that are necessary. And it could be in marketing, it could actually be in anything. I'm going to be focused a little more, a bit more on digital marketing. That's the area, that's what my company does. But I think the concepts here, I'm going to try to keep them as broad as possible because people hire consultants for all kinds of things. They have outside agencies that do all kinds of things for them. And so really what I just want to explore together with you is how do you make that assessment? If you're a business owner or a division head of anywhere in your company and you need to make that decision, how do you go about that? How do you navigate that and make that decision? So I think everyone here is obviously related to e-commerce in some sense. And the digital space is not as simple as it used to be, right? Throw up a website and hope for the best, put up some Google PPC and sell some stuff, throw it out on Amazon. Amazon's really hot right now. Everybody's getting in on Amazon. Get it real quick, get it up and running. But as your company grows and you kind of really want to mature and you want to be a healthy digital company today, you know yourself that encompasses a lot of different areas, right? You've got your development, your technical development. You've got creative. You've got, whether it's inside marketing, outside marketing. You've got all kinds of departments all of a sudden before you know it, and you could be running out of bandwidth very easily. So that's obviously your company's growing, and you want to hire more people, and that's where we kind of get into this discussion. So where do I take it? So obviously there's no yes or no answer to this question, right? There's no, okay, hire an agency, have a good day. What I will say is I want to kind of work through what some of the factors are that I have experienced in my life. I've been in this industry for over 10 years, and I've been on both sides of the desk. I've hired agencies, I've fired agencies, and now I have my own agency. So I'm familiar with that dynamic from both sides, and so I kind of want to share that with you. And then once we get through that, we'll move over and say, okay, if you choose an agency, how to kind of push forward with that and have that go as well as possible. So, we can start off with, I kind of just want to break it down to some pros and cons of each. What do you get and what do you lose for each of them? So usually when you're hiring an outside agency for a service, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to start with in-house. Your company's growing, you need more hands on deck, you want to hire someone. Having someone in-house, whether if it's for your digital marketing, that could be fantastic. He's there, he's on the floor, he's 6 feet away from you, you need something, they can pivot on a dime, they get to know the company in a much more intimate way, right? Often, you'll send something out to an agency, you'll be like, okay, we need this done in 2 weeks. And whatever, it comes in 2 weeks, it doesn't come in 2 weeks. But if someone's in your office and part of your company and he knows this is a seasonal item, this is what we do, every day that it's late, we could be losing, hundreds of thousands of dollars because this is the hot season, we must be ready for now. That's a very broad example, but Sorry, what's up? 510? 410? No, you didn't tell me, but...
How far in are you? Okay, so 1 second. Let me just...
All right.
I was going to welcome you. You don't want me to... Anyway, welcome everybody. We're very excited that you're here. There's a schedule, and I didn't introduce our illustrious presenter, so I wanted to take a second to let you know who's going to be teaching your class. Yisroel Piekarski is somebody who has a tremendous amount of years invested in the industry. It's not just teaching you things that he read in books, it's things that he experienced through being heavily involved in e-commerce businesses. This particular topic is a very important topic. A lot of people struggle. Do we do an agency? Do we do this ourselves? This was something we felt was very important to address, and we couldn't think of anyone better than Yisroel, so Yisroel Piekarski, without further ado. After this class, there'll be one more class, but after this class, we're going to break for mincha. There'll be a mincha. Each classroom, there'll be mincha, and then after this class, so in other words, at 5 o'clock, there'll be mincha, and then afterwards, we'll have the third session. Okay? Yes.
All right. Got it. Okay, thank you, Rabbi Werde. All right, I think everyone was pretty much here from the beginning. If anyone just came in, we're going to kind of diving in the difference of agency versus in-house, and I'm going to start just breaking down the pros and cons of each. So in-house, the first thing that I'm going to address, and it's often the greatest pro, is just the fact that they're there. They will have a much deeper understanding of your company, of your values, of what you're trying to accomplish. It's just the way it is. And I'm sure all of you in business, you can attest to that. Anyone who's had experience working with in-house, or working with an agency, you know that. When someone's down the hall from you, or if you have an open space, their desk is right near yours, there's just something there that won't happen for someone that's not in the office all day. Another benefit of having someone in-house is that they're a lot more versatile, right? You can hire someone for digital marketing, right? And then you have a crisis, and you're like, okay, all hands on deck. We need to run to the warehouse. There's a flood, right? You have another set of hands. Or even if you keep them only within their own department, someone who's hired to do digital marketing, that can include so many different things. Today, like I said, it's not as simple as it used to be. You have email marketing, you have social media marketing, you have search engine optimization, you have pay-per-click on social and on Google. And that can stretch someone very thin. And that's actually it's kind of a pro and a con at the same time. So it's a pro that you have someone, that you can have a guy that you can shift them depending on what your business needs. If you need someone to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, that could be very beneficial. And then there are a couple of other areas, and these are actually areas where I would venture to kind of give a yes or no answer. And those are areas where it has to do with your company's voice, like the brand identity. So for example, running your Twitter account, right? Someone who is managing your company's own Facebook page or Instagram page, right? Not the paid ads on Facebook and Instagram, but your own company's page. Those are things that, I would never say anything 100%. You always want to know what the circumstances are. But I have never encountered a business or a client where I didn't think that was true, up till now. So overall, those kind of things where it has to do with your client relationships. Do you want to hire, a third-party customer service agency? You don't want to do that. And I think you guys kind of get that. As far as cons of in-house, like I mentioned earlier, they are more versatile, but it can stretch them too thin, depending on what you want. Another area is because you're going to hire, let's assume it's one person. It's not necessarily one person, but let's assume for now it's one person, right? And you're going to want them to do multiple things, right? You're not going to hire one person and say, I'm hiring you and just do Google PPC and that's it. You're going to want them to be your social media guy or your digital marketing guy, and he's going to guide you on your email marketing strategy and your remarketing strategy and all these things. And what happens is you can find some fantastic people, but you won't get necessarily the level of expertise in each of those areas. You're going to have kind of a jack of all trades. And then other cons are just the time and cost of hiring a person. Hiring someone internally, depending on your company's culture or structure or how it's done, can really drain a company. I'm sure you're all familiar with hiring people, the interview process, bringing them in, and then kind of going through whether it's, you have HR in your company and there's like liability you have to deal with. So it's just a little bit of a headache. Now it's just something to be addressed. Those are kind of the pros and cons of having someone in-house. Now, if you flip it to hiring an agency, obviously it's a little bit of the inverse. So first of all, I would say the greatest thing that you get is you get more people, right? So you're hiring a company, you're paying them a certain rate, whatever it is. You're not getting one person. You're hiring an agency, you're getting multiple people. Agencies will have 5 to 50 plus employees. And again, that leads into the next area, that many of those people will be experts in one specific thing, right? Your company will have, a healthy agency will have like a technical SEO expert, right? They'll have a Google PPC expert, right? They'll have a network for content creation, for backlinking, things like that. And you're really your money kind of takes you a lot further. Another area to think about is if you're really kind of digging into your digital marketing. And again, this could really be any service, right? Often anything you do today, it comes along, it's not just hiring a person, it comes along with often a significant software expense, right? If you're hiring, I don't know, anybody you're hiring comes with some sort of software expense. Even if it's just another license for Windows. If it's a graphics guy, it's Adobe stuff can be kind of expensive. But when it gets to SEO, there are a number of tools that it adds up, all the software. And then an agency has all of that. They have all of them plus things you don't even know about, and that's all included, right? There's nothing else out there that they're not like going to tack on. Well, they shouldn't be, software expense. So overall, those are kind of, just to lay out, in my experience from dealing with this, those are the areas, kind of the pros and cons of each of these. And there is no one answer. And I think obviously, many of you are probably thinking of other things that are maybe specific to your business or your industry, and that's good. You should be thinking of other things. And there's no way I can list every single thing. These are kind of the general things that I've experienced over the years. So the truth of the matter is, based on these factors, I tend to boil it down to cost versus communication, right? If you kind of want to simplify it, what do you get best out of each? In-house, you will always have better communication. The person will always have a deeper and more intimate knowledge of your company if they are in-house. They're down the hall, you're schmoozing at the water cooler, right? You're yelling at them for coming late. I don't know, but they're there, right? They're part of the company culture. They know what it is. That will always be better. As far as cost goes, there's no rule, but generally, if you're hiring people that are on the same caliber, like an individual hire that has the same caliber as an expert agency, generally the agency will be cheaper. Right? You need to hire like a really, really high-end technical SEO guy. You're going to be paying him $100,000 a year. Okay? You can hire a really, really great agency for, $3 to $5K a month. So, these are just general numbers. But I'm just saying, generally, for the same level of quality, unless you're hiring like a newbie who's like a jack of all trades and he sort of knows it, but if you want to hire the same level of expertise, generally the agency will be cheaper. So you kind of have this scale of cost versus communication, right? This can change somewhat for very large companies, right? So if you have a really large company and your budget includes more than one hire, let's say you have a scope to hire 5 or 10 people in-house, that can change that factor, that decision, right? You can essentially build your own agency in-house, and that can be really, really valuable. The truth of the matter is, though, that many companies, many really big companies, still choose, not all, but many still choose to hire outside agencies. Something I noticed a little while ago, Quicken Loans, I think in 2017, they had a $300 million marketing budget, right? So there's a lot of challah there. And they actually, all their marketing is outsourced to an agency. Now, it's a giant agency, and they have a long relationship, and they're very closely connected, but They made that calculation and they decided that it's more worthwhile for them to hire an outside agency. I mean, their budget is really big. I think they even built like a whole new section of offices just for that agency. You'll have companies. I have a friend of mine who owned his own agency but lived inside Citibank, right? Their company lived inside Citibank. Citibank essentially, but they were still their own company. So there's kind of different dynamics that go on there. But I want to focus more on kind of small, medium business where you're thinking of hiring kind of one or two people. You want to really dial into your digital marketing. You want to grow your business, and kind of make that, and you're making this decision. So I would say this kind of scale, this kind of decision of cost versus communication kind of leads into the second area. I mentioned earlier that I want to talk about agency versus in-house, and then how to get the best value out of your agency. And so I think kind of moving over into that section, if we can kind of understand what are the pitfalls, right? What are the things that can go wrong with hiring an agency, then you can really take steps to prevent them and really try to and have a really, really healthy relationship that's profitable for everyone. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me here a little bit. Because it talks about, obviously we're going to be talking about communication, I want to take a step back here and just talk about the general process. It's kind of like the social process of like helping and relationships even. And I don't mean intimate relationships necessarily, just interactions that we have with each other. I think we've all had an experience where we see someone who's struggling with something, and it's something that we know really well. And you offer them help. You say, hey, I know how to do this. You should be doing this a different way. And very often, they'll listen to you, and they'll continue doing exactly what they were doing, right? They won't necessarily accept it, right? Or they won't listen to you at all. And then I think it also happens the other way around. I think I can say for myself, I've been on the other side of that. I'm guilty of that, where people have given me advice, and I didn't take it. And these people could have been really qualified. They could have been experts in the field. They've done this before. I'm new to it. But we don't always follow the expert advice. So this is something that I'm going to tie it back into the areas, if you just want a checklist of things of what is it that you can do to make your relationship with an agency better, we'll get to that. But I think understanding this part first is really what kind of gives that insight into having it as a healthy relationship and one that will continue to grow. And I think that in general, when we interact with each other, there's sort of like an unspoken social contract that things need to be equitable, right? If I'm having a conversation with you, if you're saying something, I should be paying attention to you, right? If you give me a gift, I need to say thank you, right? If someone asks me a question, I can choose to answer the question. I can choose to say, I don't really want to talk about that right now. And all of those are valid. That keeps things equitable, right? You asked something, I acknowledged you, and I gave you something back. When you have something, if someone asks you a question and you just ignore them and walk away, that kind of creates a rift. There's a rift in that connection there. Right, and so then usually the party that was sort of hurt will need to do something to make themselves feel better. Oh, he's a terrible person. Oh, whatever it is, right? So in general, we want to keep things equitable, but often what happens is there's sort of a one up and a one down, right? I give you something, I'm one up, you're one down. You say thank you, you're giving me thanks, you're giving me your gratitude, and that kind of levels things out. An interesting example is when you fall down. When people fall down, what's the first thing they say? Often the first thing someone will say when they fall down is, I'm okay. Right? I'm okay. Why is that the first thing out of their mouth? Because when someone falls down, they've kind of lost status in a certain sense. Right? They've fallen down. you need to raise yourself back up. I'm fine. I'm good. People like to be independent. They like to be self-sufficient, and we need that. And we kind of need that intrinsically. So there's this balance that we're looking to have in just everyday interactions. Now, when you go to not just a regular interaction, but an interaction that's specifically helping, right, where you have a client and a service provider, right? One person is giving something to another. So inherently, from the very beginning, there can be an inequality there. And that can lead to all sorts of kind of issues. And that's where we're going to kind of try to bring it back to the communication. So I want to give a couple of examples of kind of a helping interaction and different ways that they can go. First one is directions. Let's say I meet someone outside right here, and he's like, how do I get to the Williamsburg Bridge, right? And I can do a number of things. I can say, I don't know. I can just say, just go here, go to the Williamsburg Bridge. Or I can ask, where do you need to get? And then the guy could tell me he needs to get to Wall Street. Now, if I know he needs to get to Wall Street, I know he shouldn't be taking the Williamsburg Bridge, right? Especially not coming from down here. So essentially, by just answering his immediate question, I'm actually doing him a disservice, right? Now, so that's one thing. So I'm going to start bringing this back. With these examples, I'm going to start bringing it back to the interaction between a client and an agency. And this is actually a little bit more from the agency perspective, believe it or not, from my perspective. This is something that I need to be aware of when I'm creating a relationship with a client of these problems. I think by sharing them with you, even though these are things that I usually have to take steps to prevent, just the fact that you know about it can also kind of help prevent them as well. Another example is, let's say your child asks you for help with their homework. Right? So either you could just sit down, look at the questions, explain it to them, and you let them go, the homework's done. But then later on, you see the kid still sulking around. He's still upset, right? Okay. Or when the child asks you for help with the homework, you can recognize that there's maybe something behind all of this, right? And you say, what's on your mind? You know, sit down, and then it could be the child has some issue. Someone's bullying him in school, or he's tired, or he's hungry, or I don't know what. So the reason I'm bringing these examples is because very often when we go and we ask someone advice, whether it's casual, it's for business, even if it's a professional interaction, it's a formal way of giving help. Often, both parties can get lost in the immediate question that comes up. I need someone to do my Google PPC, and we need 6x ROI. Bam, okay, we're going to do it right away. Right? That is an unhealthy way to get anything done, and that is really not going to get you anywhere, right? More often than not, you hear people will respond to a request like that with a response. They'll say, okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then the business owner listens to that and he goes, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, right? Or, oh, we've done that already, right? So then it becomes my job, or the helper's job, to really not just accept the first question that's asked, right? And also to be careful when we're exploring what's needed to not sort of ask leading questions, right? Very slightly as you develop, but often you have to keep it open-ended because, like I said, the greatest downside of having an agency versus someone in-house is that communication. Okay, so I need to be aware that there's issues of trust that need to be built. There's issues of maybe different cultures that you have in different companies you need a bridge. Sometimes people don't even think about issues that may be related. You know, when you work with an agency, you have multiple clients, and often you get a call and someone's like, within 3 minutes, I'm like, okay, it could be very tempting for me to say, I already know everything this person's gonna say. I've dealt with 16 companies like this already, and I already know what they need, right? But that's a really big mistake, because doing something like that can prevent me from really understanding what is going on with your company. What are the actual goals that you are trying to accomplish, right? Maybe your immediate goals are not an increase in revenue. Maybe it's an increase in brand awareness. Maybe it's, I mean, I'm giving very broad examples here because it can really go into anything. And this really doesn't even apply only to digital marketing. It applies to any outside consultant or digital or agency that you hire for anything in your company. And, you know, in our company, the first thing we do, and most agencies that are worth their salt, the first thing they'll do is have something called like a deep discovery with you, right? They're not even going to accept you as a client before they sit down and have a serious meeting with you. It can take anywhere from, you know, an hour to multiple meetings, depending on what the scope of the project is. And a good agency will take the time to do that discovery, and they'll open that not with, okay, what kind of campaign are you looking for? They'll open that with something along the lines of, so tell me about your company. So again, these are things, it's more from the perspective of the helper, of the person in the agency, but I think that understanding that dynamic, we all have it. We get defensive. We're worried about trade secrets maybe. We're worried about who knows what. We don't make certain connections that a marketing specialist would make, right? And so we hold back. And so it's a joint effort, right? So I'm kind of sharing this like secret frustration maybe that an agency has. It's like this secret job that we need to do. Because just by being aware of that, then you can be aware of, oh, is there maybe something else? Am I holding back? And obviously, you're not going to call someone up and on the first phone call, you know, bare your soul to them. There isn't a way of building trust. But I just think, I mean, that kind of usually happens organically, a little bit over time, a little bit, you'll interview multiple agencies before you hire anyone. You'll feel whose culture works best for you, whose style works best for you, who you've heard, you know, recommended for specific things. But I think just being aware of that dynamic is vitally important. Right. So there are kind of a few other. There's actually a flip side to this, right? So let's say if what I'm describing now is more along the lines of me asking questions or the agency asking the company questions about what they're doing, and them holding their cards really close to their chest, right? Because they're worried. That's kind of what we've been discussing, sort of that kind of problem. There's also an exact opposite problem. And by the way, just a side note, I would say about things like, you know, company secrets, so to speak. Generally, you have very, very little to be worried about. First of all, I really shouldn't say this, I'm gonna get in a lot of trouble. Your secret company ideas are not that secret. I mean, there are some companies that have really, really unique, you know, intellectual property that can really, really affect them. But someone who's been in e-commerce for 10 years and has dealt with multiple clients in an agency perspective, no one surprises me. You know, you've seen a lot. People have different ways of doing things, and they focus a little more on this and a little more on that. They have their style, but there's no, you know, big dark secret. That's first of all. Second of all, even if there is, it is in the company's own best, in the agency's own best interests to protect that as much as you do, right? Because the minute they violate that trust, not only do they lose you as a client, the whole company disappears. That you can't survive that way. And of course, there's always, anyone should be willing to sign an NDA, and that should really kind of help, you know, if you're people that are really concerned about kind of company, you know, inside information, that's always an option. But I would say that's not really a concern because it's against their own best interest. They'd be shooting themselves in the foot if they don't protect your information. Going back to the other thing I would say is that there's another potential problem that you can have when you work with an agency, which is the exact opposite. You're stressing over something. You're like, I need to do digital marketing. I need to do digital marketing. My hands are full. I can't handle this. It's overwhelming me. My bandwidth, I'm out of bandwidth, right? and then you can finally hire an agency, and you say, oh, thank God, I'm done, please help me. And you sit back and you say, take it, please, I'm giving it to you, and you give them everything. That can be just as bad, because again, we need to be a part of your business, right? I would say if you really want to kind of make a bumper sticker out of it, don't take something and go, oh, let's farm that out. You got to think of the agency as a partner in your business, right? Because again, that is your greatest point of failure, right? I mean, I'm assuming that you're dealing with a competent agency, someone who's competent, you've done your due diligence, you've interviewed different people, different options, but that is your greatest point of failure. The greatest point of failure is that they are somewhere else, and they just don't know as much. So the more you consider them a true partner in your business, in achieving the goals that you want to achieve, the greater your results are going to be. And that goes both ways. That goes both ways for holding back information intentionally because you're scared or you need to develop trust, as well as just giving them all the information, but then not being an active participant. Because that's a one-time thing, they get good information, but then as it goes on, any healthy company is evolving. There's seasonal things, there's new products being introduced, new services, whatever it may be. It's constantly evolving, and a healthy agency also is not just going to create one marketing strategy for you. Marketing strategy is also constantly evolving. Society's evolving, everything's evolving, whatever. Memes on Facebook are evolving, right? You got to keep up. You got to keep up with all of them. So that's really kind of those are really the main points that I wanted to address. I think is really kind of bringing those 2 points together. So first of all, when you're kind of trying to make this decision of agency versus in-house, you really need to consider the pros and cons of each. Now, you should really be making your own list. Maybe include a team member, multiple team members. The items that I listed here, I've kind of boiled it down to cost versus communication. But these are very broad because I'm talking to everybody here. You really need to make it tailored to your own company. That being said, like I said, I've been on both sides of the desk. I've been within a company hiring agencies, as well as on the other side of being an agency getting hired. So I've seen this in multiple ways. And in my experience, these are really the main focal points. So kind of boiling it down to that, you get all that extra expertise, multiple people, for a price that will usually be equivalent or less than the same level of expertise that you would have in-house. But there's a really, really serious challenge in the communication. And it's a serious challenge. I'm saying it's a serious challenge because you can't diminish it. That being said, even though it's a serious challenge, it's one that is very easily can very easily be addressed. And that's kind of where I kind of went off to this whole other thing of kind of the one up, one down. I know it's a little bit out there maybe. It's a little bit not cut and dry. These are the 10 things that you should do to get the most out of your agency. But in my experience, I think having that perspective is really, then the checklist sort of writes itself, right? You understand that. You understand, I'm worried about this. I am scared of sharing this kind of information. Maybe I am insulted because they gave me a recommendation so fast. Does that mean I'm really stupid that I didn't think of this on my own? There can be all kinds of things going on. That being said, I'm going to mention a couple of things here just to kind of break it down. For those who want a specific to-do list. And again, these are things that I'm sure I've mentioned throughout our conversation here, but I'm just going to kind of break them down. So obviously, again, I would say the main thing is consider your agency a partner in your business, okay? If you're using phrases like, we got to farm this out, you're just in for trouble and a lot of wasted money. You got to consider them a partner in your company. You really need to actively work on developing that trust with your agency, and that goes both ways. And again, it's in their best interest to protect you, and NDAs are always an option. Digging in a little bit more specifically is when you hire an agency, you can kind of dial it in now to a little more to the to-dos, is you really need to then do your own discovery. of what are we looking to accomplish with hiring this company. What do we need? You need to set your own clear parameters of what your goals are, what milestones you're looking to achieve, in what timeline you're looking to achieve them. You really need to break all these things down, and you kind of need to do it yourself. Now, of course, any agency will help you through this process, but you will get back as much as you give, right? I've seen so many different types of clients, and it's just a fact. You have people who come in who have done their homework before our first call, right? Before the first discovery call we had, they've done their homework. They know the metrics they're looking for, they know what their goals are, they know what those things are, they've broken it down. We will still do a full detailed discovery. We're going to ask you about your company, we're going to ask you about your history, what you've done in the past, what has worked for you, what hasn't worked for you, we're going to go through all of that. And we're really going to try to get it in a very organic way and develop a relationship where it should be ongoing. But it must go both ways. If it's not going both ways, you're just limiting yourself and you're limiting your own results. Another kind of checklist item I would say is set a schedule with your agency. So, very often what happens is you will have a discovery call and it can feel really wonderful. You spend an hour talking about your company. We all love talking about our own companies, right? It tends to happen as you drift away, right? You'll say, okay, let's catch up next week, whatever, ABC, and then you kind of drift away. You want to set a recurring review with your agency, whatever it may be, quarterly, monthly, every other week, every week, depending on what you're working on, depending how fast you're working on it. But you need to kind of keep that up. So you need to set those parameters, but then you need to keep following up on this. And again, I'm not saying this to remove that responsibility from the agency. The agency needs to do that just as much. But again, it's part of the same concept of being an equal partner, of really being invested in your relationship with this agency, because that's what you're going to get back. Your agency is going to be sending you reports. Read them. Ask questions. Write down your questions. Challenge them. Send out reports. I'm sure you all know. I mean, again, I don't know everybody here. I don't know what your business practice is, but I can bet that any number of business owners here has a whole file in their email of reports that went completely unread, and they have no idea. And they get a quick summary at the end of the month, and they make a fly-by-night decision based on that. Then kind of in more developmental, I would just kind of break out, again, when defining what you want from your agency, always veer yourself towards specific examples instead of buzzwords, okay? I find that so many people, what do we want? We want it to be modern, we want it to be blah, 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 all these buzzwords. They mean nothing, okay? You listen to them, you kind of have to interpret them, but more often than not, you'll have one or two websites in the back of your head that you saw that you really liked, or one or two campaigns that you've seen in the past that you really liked. Tell us about them, right? That doesn't mean we're going to do a cut and paste. It means that we get insight into what your goal is. We get insight into what you're trying to achieve, right? You say, I want a nice, light, modern website with good use of white space. Thank you very much. That doesn't mean anything. And that's really it. Again, I think these are all things that I am constantly aware of. When I'm working with a client, I'm constantly aware of all these things. I want to know as much about the company as possible. I want to know what their goals are, their short-term goals, their long-term goals. Very often we'll have multiple campaigns going on for a company. Some are short-term, seasonal things. Some are just long-term brand awareness campaigns. Things like SEO can take a lot longer. PPC, you'll get a quicker return. And these are things that I'm constantly trying to be vigilant about. And I just feel that by sharing them with you, kind of giving you that insight, I think it could really, really benefit everyone in that dynamic. So that's kind of the gist of it. That's really what I wanted to share with you guys. So you have your breakdown of your decision tree, your pros and cons of where and when to focus on in-house versus an agency. And if and when you do choose to work with an agency, really consider that a serious partnership, invest in that relationship, and you can see some really, really great returns. Thank you guys. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to listen. Thank you. Thank you. How you doing, Baruch? You have a question? I personally, my company is digital marketing, but I tried, a number of people mentioned that as well. I tried to keep it as broad as possible because I think this same concept applies equally to any outside contractor that you will be working with versus in-house. It's the same concept. It could be in technical development, it could be in creative, it could be in content creation, it could be in, I don't know, maybe even in sourcing product, it could be in customer service, it could be anything in your company. Any company today has so many divisions and sections, and we get overwhelmed, and that's great. Your company's growing, you need more help. So how do you navigate that process of deciding the pros and cons? That's kind of what we discussed. Yes? Right. Okay. So the question is, when you're working with an agency, how do you know when to move on, essentially? Right. So that really depends on what your goals are. It really depends on what your goals are. So again, I said, that's too broad for me to answer. Specifically, what I would say is, are you making money or losing money? And often, your work with an agency is not even about money. Many clients, it's not about bottom line. Right? Their goals are different. Their goals are just brand awareness, right? When Coca-Cola puts up a billboard, is there an ROI on that billboard? I mean, I'm sure someone's done the calculation, but it's a little more detached, right? It's kind of broader. Some people just want clicks. Some people just want to collect email addresses. There are different types of goals. Okay, so specifically, if we dial in specifically to ROI, what I would say is that usually for ROI, you need to have a number that tells you you're not losing money, right? So if you have a 25% profit margin, you need a minimum of 4x ROI, right? That's just breaking even, right? So you want to get usually 6, 8x to be healthy. You also need to cover, the agency costs, things like that, your ad, on top of just your ad spend. So as far as pure ROI for revenue, you need to know what your break-even number is, and then you need to decide how much time you're willing to give the agency, okay? It's not very often. It does happen sometimes. An agency takes off, and in month one, they hit it. They knock it out of the park. It's a home run. Usually, it's a minimum of 3 to 6 months. It's usually a minimum of 3 to 6 months. Now, if you have an existing campaign that was already doing 4x, and then they take it over, and it drops down to 2x, then you got a problem on your hands, right? And often, like I know we often turn down clients, right? Before we accept a client, we do a discovery, we ask them all about their company, and then we'll dig into their analytics, and we'll say, how are these campaigns being managed up until now? And if we think that they've been managed fine, right, and we say, hey, the people you had till now were really good. There's nothing here that they didn't do that we'd be doing. Yeah, many agencies will. I personally think it's in any agency's long-term best interest not to do that, because then how do you build your company, right? A company like mine is built purely on my results and my reputation. So if I'm very short-sighted, I just want a client right now, right, because I just need cash flow. If I know that I'm not going to be able to give that company a return, then all of a sudden the percentage of my clients that were not successful continues to grow. I need my clients as much as possible. I need to have as high a success rate as possible to have a successful company, because that's how this works. So much of this is just referrals and recommendations. Right. Okay, I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. Yes. Again, it depends. It depends on what the company's goals are. I know a lot of people here are focused just on revenue, which is understandable. Often we deal with clients that their goals are not revenue, or not immediately revenue. So for revenue specifically, yeah, we need to look at it and be able to say that I could lower your ACOS or increase your ROI or whatever it is, right? I need to be able to look at it. I need to be able to do an audit of your account. And that's how I can tell you. I can look at it. I could see the history of how it's been managed and say, were there things that were missed? Were there things that I have input to give here that I can increase your results? Sometimes people don't really care. Sometimes people say, you know what, it's been managed fine, but I'm doing, a second project with you, and I want to keep everything under one roof, right? Convenience. I don't want to deal with two agencies. I'd rather deal with one agency. Or they had a personal falling out with the previous, whatever, there could be other reasons, but purely on a number scale, what we do at least is we do an audit, and then based on that audit, we'll tell you if we think we can improve the results. And we do. We just last week, I think we told 2 clients that we're not going to accept them because they're just not a right fit for us. So we had two different kinds. So one is that they were already doing everything right. That was one. We had a client that came to us. They were already doing everything right, and they came to us because it was a very, very tough industry, and they weren't getting great results. But we looked at it and we said, we can't honestly tell you that there's something that we can add here. We can't do that. We look at it, and if you're losing money doing this, I'm not going to stretch you out for another 6 months and make you lose another 6 months of a 6-month retainer for no reason. I don't want to do. There's no benefit in that for me. It's a net loss for me. It just ruins my reputation. The other one was actually interesting. I'm glad you asked that. The other reason we turned down a client is because their website wasn't up to scratch. They had a terrible, terrible website. And I can run the best campaigns in the world for you. Your website just won't convert. No one's going to buy anything, right? We deal with, so much focus is placed on things like SEO or PPC, right? Those are things that just bring clients to your page. They just get them onto your website. Then you get into really, there's a whole other, chapter here, which is CRO, which is conversion rate optimization, right? And that's true wherever it is. Even if you're on Amazon, which I'm assuming it sounds like you are, then how do you design your product page? How many images do you put up? What content do you write? What's the title? What goes above the fold? What goes below the fold? When you're designing your own website, it's many, many times more. You're dealing with site speed. You're dealing with your redirects, your 404s, your all these things you need to deal with to make it a pleasant experience on the website to help the customer through that funnel. So that's a conversion rate. And if we look at a website and we say, this website's from the 90s, you're not going to convert anything. You're going to spend all this money in marketing. You're going to bring all this traffic to your website, and you're not going to get any conversions. And if that's your goal, if you're looking for whatever it is, a 6x ROI or 8x ROI on your ad spend, I can't give you any ROI. I can give you traffic, but nothing's going to happen. And we give them, a brief list, overview of what needs to happen. It's a free consultation. You got to give a little bit, but often, so you have a client that says, I'm serious. I'm investing in this now. We're going to do it, and then we'll even get in touch with their development team, or sometimes they'll use some of our development guys, and we'll clean it up, right? But we're not going to launch a marketing campaign if you're the front door to your store, if the cash register is broken. Right? Any other questions? All right, guys. Thank you so much. It's been great.